much so that like just last week, a fan contacted me and said they were taking down the artwork in his Taco Bell, and he was like kind of distraught about it. He wrote me this email. It was really funny, and he said he's building a Taco Bell with my artwork in it in the metaverse, because he's like, I always want to be able to go to that place.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so complimentary.
Hey, y'all. I am so excited to share with you today's podcast because it's with a dear friend of mine for many years. Today's guest has had work featured in the Smithsonian and Rolling Stone magazines. He did the poster for the 2009 Beijing Olympic Games, and you can see his artwork in just about every Taco Bell store on the planet. His artwork was also the feature of an international campaign for Absolute Vodka called Absolute Smith. Mark T. Smith's artwork is the epitome of cool and yet timeless. For decades, Mark has had a passion for bringing unique, colorful, collage-like paintings to the masses. In today's episode, Mark brings his perspective on how art influences financial investments like Wynwood, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a neighborhood in Miami, to how art provides a voice when words are not permitted during times of civil war and unrest. Join me in learning the ins and outs of art and how you can take an easy step in understanding how art can be used as an investment tool, as well as make an impact on personal emotions and fulfillment, as well as online NFTs. Thanks for spending time with us today. Now let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to an Easy Step podcast. Here we bring you an inspiring person, message, or insight that will help you to take an easy step or a few toward living your best life. Now here's your host, Court Potter, a former New York advertising executive turned real estate broker and entrepreneur who has always been passionate about learning what makes people successful. Thanks for spending time with us today. Now let's get started with your easy step toward reaching your audacious goals.
So we've asked Mark to come here to inspire you to take art into a new level and make it a profitable business venture, whether it be in a commercial space or for your own personal investments. So thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So how do you think commercial real estate, for example, and a consumer brands can be financially impacted by art?
I think a good example of that would be if you look at well, like for instance, when I was living in Miami, there's a developer there who started developing Wynwood, which is the arts district there. And Wynwood, as a location, especially given that it's in Miami, doesn't have that much going for it. There's no beach. It's hot. It's all concrete. It's next to a highway, right? So it seems like not the place people would want to hang out in Miami when you have the beach and all that stuff. And the way they transformed the neighborhood was really simple. They obviously buy a bunch of properties that they're going to develop. But they transformed the neighborhood by using art, by using street art specifically. So they hired a bunch of street artists, world-renowned street artists, to come and start to just tag all the buildings. And it took it from a derelict, sort of vacant neighborhood to a really vivacious, lively place. And all it took to do that was just get a bunch of artists in there and transform it visually. And then slowly the whole neighborhood transformed. And if you were to go there, you know, I first went there in like say 03, 04, and it was still sketchy, but interesting. Now it's like a fully developed neighborhood.
Yeah, I've been down there. Those restaurants are amazing, and then you can just go have a whole experience by just walking through and seeing those different
like
vignettes of artists and their concepts.
Yeah, and there's like Wynwood walls, and so you know you think of there's sort of there's a bunch of different impacts from that, right? There's the impact, the tourism impact. There's the actual art galleries that are there that sell artwork. There's the restaurant tours and all the entrepreneurs and shops and all that stuff. So it's actually kind of easy. It's almost they have it sort of templated. The development group that does that, they did it in Soho, they did it in South Beach, and then they did it again.
So do those developers go in and buy specific certain buildings or block and then convert them for like specific themes? And then it attracts other businesses to come in, and it just launches one ripple effect, essentially? Yeah,
essentially. I mean, the way it was described to me, because I worked with that development group on a different project, the way they described their process was they identify the area where, you know, they can maximize value, you know, it's overlooked or whatever the markers are that they look for in the neighborhood. And then they buy no more than 10 properties, because they've found over the years that if they buy the whole neighborhood, nobody jumps in to help develop, right? Because it's like, oh, that's your project, right? So they don't oversaturate or overbuy. But what they do that's really interesting is they think about what the main corridors are in that neighborhood, and then wherever those intersect, they put a restaurant.
Got it.
And they run the restaurant at a loss because that's the anchor point for the neighborhood. And then they put other outposts to sort of create the box that's going to be the neighborhood, right? And then it develops from there.
Or to like create a whole experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm surprised actually they haven't written a book or something about it, but it's really, really interesting how they do it. And artwork 100% was, it's the thing that took it over the top, and it's the whole reason that people even go to the neighborhood.
So if you were to advise commercial real estate investors, you would essentially look at the model or go meet with them, or you could just go and look at a property or two and just start to bring other investors in to really create a theme within a 10-block radius.
Exactly, or however big the neighborhood is, right?
Okay.
I mean, and I think the impact of that is the impact of artwork on the way people, it changes the way you feel about where you are, right? So if you think about it, I mean, we're in Orlando, so a good example is like applied arts is Disney, right? Mm-hmm. You go there, I mean, it's like the last time I was there, I went to the Star Wars exhibit, right? And it was like being in the movie. It was incredible. It was like totally immersive, and that's all art. It's all come from the mind of creatives.
Well, art is so subjective.
Totally.
How does someone go about and feel as though that they're finding the right artist or artists?
Well, I guess it depends on what your objective is, right? So, I mean, there's for personal collecting, artwork is not dissimilar to the stock market in that there's blue chip artists, just like there's blue chip stock, right? And then there's value stock and value. It's the exact same sort of strata that
Great
happens
analogy.
in art. And so you can make a bet like you would on a stock. You could take a penny stock and make a bet on it and hope it goes, becomes the unicorn or whatever. It's the same in the art world. And so you could do it as an investment strategy. There's actually fractional investment in artwork now. So there's groups out there that buy paintings by very known artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat or Warhol or whomever, and they know there's going to be appreciation to that asset, and so you buy a fractional part of it, and then when they sell it, you get your profit from that. So that's another way. But like as just a person buying artwork, I mean, I always tell people think less about buy what you like what you're passionate about. Because if you buy something you're not passionate about, it better be an investment, Yeah. And I think whether work's going to go up in value or down in value, if that's your sole rationale for buying it, maybe you should buy something else, probably, right?
Sure.
Because it should touch you in a like that passionate kind of way. It shouldn't just be you shouldn't just look at it through an investment lens. So and I think like there's auction houses. It's very layered, the art world. So there's lots of places you can kind of plug in.
So in like the 1980s, there were like the pastels that were very abstract art. In the 90s, it was like more of like the hard reds and black and whites, it seems. In 2000s, each decade seems as though it has its own theme.
Yeah.
With Taco Bell, when we met originally, like years ago, and your artwork is still relevant today, how do you feel as though that to keep artwork more relevant and present versus more themed within whatever's trending?
Oh, so to make it more timeless?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that I mean, when I look at my career, it's been quite a long time now. Like the thing that I'm trying to do is I would like to have a career where I made one masterpiece. Like if I could just make one painting that was like out of the park, or one sculpture, or one drawing, whatever it is, one output that is like certified masterpiece. That's the goal, right? So just like a musician would want to have a platinum record or whatever, it's kind of the same idea. Or just like that song that everybody knows. It's like that's really what I'm trying to do now, less so than earlier in my career was about I had to survive. So I had to make money, to survive, and it was about coming from being an unknown to a known, right? So that took quite a while. But now being a known entity, it's like, okay, what's the next thing I can do?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, to be clear, Mark and I met about 20 years ago when Yum Brands, which it was at the time KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza, Long John Silver's, A&W, hired me to help them redesign the prototype stores. I found Mark and knew immediately that you needed to be the artist for Taco Bell.
Eternally grateful for that, so thank you.
Yes, and now your artwork is still relevant in each one of the stores, and they rolled it out into the entire system.
Yeah.
And you were telling me before the show about how you still get letters.
I do.
And
I get emails from people. They send me pictures of their kids, and like my favorite one is a lot of people. Apparently, my work that I did for those stores is really appeals to young kids. And so I get these great pictures of them posing like the characters in the.
Oh, that's great.
They're really cute. And so much so that like just last week, a fan contacted me and said they were taking down the artwork in his Taco Bell, and he was like kind of distraught about it. He wrote me this email. It was really funny, and he said he's building a Taco Bell with my artwork in it in the metaverse because he's like I always want to be able to go to that place.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so complimentary. And I mean, it's obviously it's been a long time, you know. I think the hard part is like from an artistic point of view, you know, when something lives that long out in the public, you kind of want to change it. You know, you want to update it, like you were saying, the different colors and this and that. I think as an artist, probably musicians feel the same way. It's like you release a song and you're like, oh, you know, if I just did this other thing with the song, you know, and you only see it through that lens because you made it.
So
Right.
for the artist or that is kind of struggling, that transitioning from what is art versus like being able to go commercial, like what was that transition for you when you went and, you know, Absolute Vodka approached you about doing an international campaign? Like, how did you feel as though of your art being in Taco Bell stores and a fast food concept? And what was that, like, your logic for, you know, doing that work in that commercial space?
Well, interestingly, before you called me to come down and work on that, I just finished Fast Food Nation, the book Fast Food Nation. I read it on the beach, and 2 weeks later you called about this project, and I was like, oh, that's it. What an interesting trial of like, do I really, you know, how do I really feel about this? And I thought long and hard about it. And for me, the rationale was it's obviously a massive international audience. It's people who, generally speaking, probably don't go to art galleries, probably don't go to museums. And it was an opportunity to get artwork in front of people who generally aren't exposed to it. And I thought, what a great opportunity. Like and from my POV, it was like, if one kid decides to be an artist because of this, it's a total win, you know? And that's the way I looked at it. And I still do. I still look at it. And I think the emails I get from people, it worked. Like it's working, you know? It's touching people in some way. I think I'm a little different than most artists in that I went to school to Pratt. I went to Pratt in Brooklyn, and I took illustration instead of fine art, even though I wanted to be an artist, not an illustrator. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to understand the mechanisms, the entrepreneurial mechanisms of like, how am I going to make a living at this? Like, I don't want to graduate and then not do this. Like, my whole point is I want to do this thing. That's why I'm learning these skills. And so that's why I didn't go to the fine art part of the school, because there wasn't a clear pathway that I could see. Like, it seemed like my future would be not in my control, you know. And so that's why I went to the illustration department. And so the application of the work is as interesting to me as making the work. Like, it's just that simple. Like, I make the same type of work for myself that I do for clients. So it's not like there's a huge gap. But I think making work for a client is a real challenge, like making commission work and making it fit within, you know, all the guardrails that you have when you're making something like that. It's challenging and it's interesting. You know?
So I found you back in the day. There was
Yes.
really the way that you found artists was through these books that artists would be able to market themselves through.
Yep.
How do you find that artists are able to position themselves and market themselves in today's platform and like really stand out so that they can make a profit as an artist?
Well, all those books migrated to digital. But I don't think that, this is my opinion, I don't know their business, but I don't think the digital versions of those are as successful, because there's just something about picking up a book that's, it's like you don't know what page you're going to turn to, what's going to be on the next page. And I think when you're looking for things in a digital format, you've already put a search criteria, so you're not going to stumble into something as readily as a book. So and maybe that's my own. It's sort of like reading the New York Times. Like like when I fly cross country, I love to read the Times. It's like you read articles that you otherwise wouldn't read. It's kind of that same idea. So all that searching migrated to digital, and but what's happened with social media, especially, and then e-commerce on top of it, is that artists really have much more control than they ever had over their own brand, over their own image, and over their own career, and they can reach much further than they ever could reach. I mean, before, like you said, it would have to be a bunch of books that were mailed out, or a bunch of postcards, promotions and all that kind of thing that we used to do.
Yeah, so
I don't miss that.
Yeah, I mean, it was like
it was work.
It was a lot of work. It
was
like
a lot
of mailings, a lot of
Every quarter,
Yeah.
I used to do mailings, and you'd have to print them and mail them out,
and now everything is like through Instagram
or email or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's changed a lot, and it's.
Are the schools teaching that?
Oh yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. I think that's what's interesting is they are teaching that, and I think also that it's a little different because I grew up, I wasn't a digital native, so I had to learn all that in my adulthood. I wasn't born with a cell phone like kids are now, so the generations that have followed me are much more adept at the digital part than I would ever be, because think about it. I learned to paint and draw. Like it's about as old school as it gets, right? So it's like, and I'm drawing on a pad now. I have to say though, it's not as pleasurable.
So
the digital.
Speaking of digital,
Mm-hmm.
then there's like this whole talk about the NFTs
Mm-hmm.
and that whole. Can you explain exactly what that is?
Can anybody explain what it is?
That's why I'm hoping that you could give some sort of insight, because it's like seems to be the buzzword now with all the technology.
Web 3 and all that.
Yes.
Well,
so
I think I was
how
around.
does one even go about that?
Well, I was around for Web 1, so and I had a design business during that time. And a lot of the things that I saw during that time, I see now. And I also see a lot of the promises that were made in those days in Web 1 they're coming to fruition now because the technology is making it possible. I think back on it, we built this online game. And I remember at the time being in a meeting. I was at an ad agency, and the client was there, and everybody's really excited because there were 5 million people on the internet.
Oh my gosh!
And it was it was the biggest thing because it was bigger than like a really popular TV show, audience-wise, right? So they were just like, it was really interesting. So with Web3, I think there's a lot of interesting things happening. Like there's the NFT. I think we're in super early days with everything. So who knows what direction it's all going to go? I love that. I love being in the unknown and seeing where it leads you. And certainly, obviously, artists are making money on it, which is also really good. But I think one of the things that I really appreciate about it is now we're having conversations about intellectual property and copyrights and all that sort of thing. And I think we're moving to a point where there'll be residual income for artists, and that'll track over your lifetime, right? And that to me is really interesting because that's
similar to what they're doing in like music. And
yeah,
stuff.
exactly the same as music or film.
And they're doing this in Europe.
It's already they passed that like 10 years ago in Europe, or 5 years ago or something like that in Europe, and that meant that like in my case, if I sold a piece and then that piece went on to be something great, and it got sold multiple times, I would get a residual payment for every time that transaction happened. And that's something that's sort of built into the blockchain with the NFTs, being able to track ownership and all that stuff. And I think that's a game changer, because like for someone like me who I've done a lot of stuff, it's all been out there. It'd be nice to have a residual income off of that. It'd be like a band that has, a couple #1 hits. It's like it's enough, it pays out over a lifetime. It's really nice. So I think that's a big thing in Web3 that could be a huge thing for creatives. The other thing that's really cool about Web3 is that it's a world, it's a complete world, but it can't be built without creatives.
Yeah.
It can't be. And I think the value of creativity because of that and because of other things that are happening in our society, like to me, creativity is going to be the next really in-demand skill or the hot skill. And the reason I think that is because you can't drive innovation without creativity. You can't. And all of these unicorn companies, they all plateau at some point, right?
I think I've heard you use the analogy where if you created a world without flowers.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine a world without just that one thing. Like you leave that one touch out and it changes the whole composition of everybody's experience.
I was like, I remember you saying that. I was like, I love that analogy. Like, it's like, it really is.
It really is that. And I think it's also like...
it's like where the tech and programmers meet the creatives and how you bring...
And how they work together, what that collaboration looks like. Because I think, there's a very different personality types, generally speaking. And I think that the real... the thing they have in common, creatives and programmers, developers, is that they can... to a degree, they can see the unknown, right? They can see the thing that doesn't exist and then manifest that. And so creatives and developers have that in common. So it's kind of easy for them to talk to each other in that way because they can see the thing that's not there, which other people, like, who could imagine the metaverse? Like just that concept, that construct in your head, it's like that something out of nothing. It's the craziest thing to think about, right? But like for creatives or developers, they live in that world where it's like you're literally building the thing as you're going. It's really cool. And I think that's going to, from what I've seen already in the metaverse, like, and in the NFT market, like, I'm going to try to think how I can say this delicately. The quality of the work isn't really great yet. There's some great work there, but most of it is just okay. And I think that's going to change radically in the next little bit. Like you're just going to see it, like it's going to flip. And I think the other reality is like NFTs seem like a crazy idea or a weird way to collect art to people. But like if collectors, they eventually fill up their house. And unless they're really wealthy to buy another house to fill up, like they eventually run out of wall space. And they sort of, they generally go through a cycle where they collect a lot and then they sort of fall off because there's just no more room. NFTs, you don't have that problem.
So
you could take it with you anywhere.
So so bringing in this metaverse
Mm-hmm.
and your physical space.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at the physical space, how do investors look at their, say, commercial property,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be office, retail, even industrial,
Yeah.
and converting that? Can the metaverse inspire those that are looking into, and how do you see that happening and playing out?
Well, that's a great question because it's like there are two. One world is actual reality, right?
Yeah.
And the other world isn't. But I think like it's going to change the way people interact, the way they meet. Like think about how like COVID changed the way that we work, fundamentally changed the way we work, and the repercussions of that still being sorted out. But just like it's going to be really hard to get people to go to an office. Well, if you could just put on a headset and you're in the office with everybody, you don't have to sit in traffic. You don't have to burn all those greenhouse gases.
Or if they could create an office space that, has art and has creativity in that space that they want to actually go and,
You've got to have a reason
space
to go to the space. That's exactly right. Right.
Yeah.
So exactly right. Because it's like, and that's why the companies spend a ton of money on the super kick-ass headquarters because they want to have a reason for it. And that's why the CEOs want everybody back in the office, right? Because they're paying the mortgage on that and they want to, they want to get the value out of it. But you're right. Yeah. And I think the thing about artwork is, artwork, like it just to me, it changes your day, or it has the potential to change your day. It could put you in a great mood, make you think about something in a different way that you haven't thought about it before. And I think also just being around, seeing like manifest creativity around you it's a healthy thing. It's a very human thing when you think about it. Like we started drawing on cave walls. It's not different. That's no different than a kid putting a drawing on the fridge or, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's kind of the same.
Well, when everyone's like, so many people are shopping online, like, they're going to Amazon and they're purchasing everything, but still people want to go and physically shop and
Yeah.
they want to have that experience.
Yeah.
And they want to, go and have that transition. So many people are like, retail's dying or dead, but you still see people out in restaurants, and you see people shopping, and you really see that creativity being more and more explored. And so how do you see creatives and artwork evolving through this transition?
Well, I think creativity,
or influencing it, I should say.
Yeah, I think creativity is like it's a constant, right? Like it's a part of the human condition. It's not, it's just part of being human. There's always been creative people. There will always be creative people, and they'll always make stuff that is surprising and delightful and horrible and whatever, right? I think on the retail side, I think people, especially in the media, they need the story has to be sensational to get anybody's attention. So it's like, if you don't say the death of retail, nobody's going to read it, right? But the reality is, it's just changing. It's not dying. It's just going to be different. Because I buy lots of stuff on Amazon. Generally speaking, I buy my clothes in person because I actually like to touch the fabric, and that's just me. I just and I like to have it tailored, and it's like there's an experience there that I like. That if I could shop on Seville Row, that's where I would shop. I wouldn't shop on Amazon. You know what I mean? It's a totally different experience. So I think that's not going away. I think it's going to get more tactile, more boutique-y, more immersive experience-wise. Like a good example of that is if you take, I can't think of the name of the company, but it's the company where you would build those bears.
Build-A-Bear.
Hello. But like that's a really interesting idea when you think about it, because it's it's retail. If you told somebody I'm going to have a teddy bear store, they would just be like, what? But when you turn it into an experience like that, it works phenomenally well. You look at a store like Toys R Us, owned the toy market, right? And blew up because it wasn't an experience. And kids and parents got used to going and had the expectation of an experience. You're not just going to buy this thing. You're going to go build a bear, or you're going to go make a doll, or whatever. All those stores that came out that were really involved. Like it was a activity. It wasn't just shopping. It was shopping, but it was an activity and shopping, right? So I think you're just going to see things trend more that way, where it's
really
experiential.
Just you're where people are experiencing
and immersive
in the creativity and the creative process.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, and they're exactly.
Just like
they're
you were
making
saying
it.
Originally with Wynwood.
Yeah.
People are walking through and experiencing various art exhibits and vignettes of artwork.
One of the greatest thing about Wynwood is you can't get away from the artwork. It's omnipresent. And so it's unique in that regard, because there are other places in the world like that, but it's completely immersive. It's not a casual experience. It's like you're completely surrounded by art. All the bars have art in it. It's like the hotel I stayed in. Yeah. Right? Like I would rather stay in a place that I'm surrounded by art. I'm an artist. I want to see art. Even if it's bad art, I still want to see it, or what I judge as bad. And I'm curious to see what other people are producing. Where's your head at? Why are you making this, that kind of thing? And I think it's the same. When I travel, I'll go to museums for the same reason. I want to know. I want to try to uncover why people make what they make, right? Or why did they do that, or how do they think? And I think artist to artist, it's a little easier to figure out because your minds work similarly. And there's mechanical things that you can take apart to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to me. But I think you're right. Retail, it's got to be an experience. It's got to be memorable. I think if you go into a really high end store, if you bought something at a Gucci or Versace or something like that, that experience is different than buying something off of Amazon.
Yes. And then if you were to give advice to artists or to a commercial real estate property owner, be it office, multifamily, or even commercial retail, what would that be as far, or even municipalities like cities, what in sculptures to, art on various buildings, what would that advice be? Would you advise them and to how would they go about really finding artists?
To find artists? Look locally, start local. just look in your neighborhood. There's artists everywhere. They're everywhere, you know? And I think like it does, like, yes, you can collect something that's insanely valuable and is all, there's that, right? But there's also like a local artist that, like, that sale of a couple $100 for something is really meaningful to that artist. Like, it's a difference between eating and not eating or paying the rent. Like, I've been in that situation, and you really, really appreciate those sales, especially when you're starting out. And I think like for cities and things like that, it's a really simple and easy way to make your city more beautiful. It's just that simple, right? Like, if you have a whole part of town that's kind of, you know, it's been overlooked or whatever has happened economically to that part of, you know, the city, it's the easiest way to transform it visually.
Local artists.
Yeah, get a bunch of local artists, you know, do it as a grant, do whatever, and just transform that whole place visually. And then everybody thinks about it differently. They don't go, oh, that's the place you don't go to. They go, that's the place you go to. That's what Wynwood was. It was the place you didn't go, and it became like the focal point for art.
The destination.
Yeah, like the destination for it. And because you can see, there's great artists there that you can see, and local artists. It's everything. It's very democratized. You know, there's super well-known artists that are, you know, especially in the street art graffiti thing, like very, very well known. And there's people who are not as well known right next to each other. Yeah. You know, and there's something really wonderful about that. You know, like it's, and so if I were a city, you know, I think I always rate cities and I look at like what's their cultural profile. You know, like I wouldn't choose to live in a city that was devoid of that. It just wouldn't even be on my list because it's too important to me. Yeah. You know, but I think there's what they've done within that development thing. You can replicate that so easily, you know. And then the thing is, like, and then it becomes something else, and then it's going to transition. You know, it's going to be that for a while, and then it's going to be something else, and you know, things just always are changing.
But speaking of evolving, I mean, you see brands like Starbucks constantly evolving their in-store experience.
Yep.
Because they want people to come
and driven
in.
by artwork.
Yeah, exactly.
Tons and tons of artwork
is
produced by Starbucks and for Starbucks.
And they seem to do it like on a global level. Mm-hmm. And speaking of globally, like, you know, with everything that's taking place, like, how do you see artwork influencing, you know, what's kind of going on in our global,
our crazy world
nowadays? And I guess how do you see artwork kind of influencing that in a positive way?
That's a great question. I think that, like, you know, you think of there are certain works of art like Guernica by Picasso, right? Huge anti-war statement, amazing painting, definitely a masterpiece. And so there's that, right? The other thing you see is sort of like activism. Top of mind to me comes like Bono, right? Like somebody who's like spent a tremendous amount of resources and time to change things in the world. And I think that, and obviously he has, besides being a talented musician, having the financial resources to do that stuff is also part of the gig, you know. But I think, but that's the way I see it. I think like people listen to artists, especially in a different way than they would listen to, say, a politician, mm-hmm. right? Like a politician, you're like going, maybe it's the truth, maybe it's not, right?
Right.
All right. Maybe it's maybe I'm being spun, you know. But like I think from an artist, there's a certain. I think the general public sort of looks at it like, to a degree, they're truth tellers, because that's kind of what right? They're unearthing like what is the human truth. I mean, that's what makes a good song. That's what makes a good work of literature. That's what makes a good painting or sculpture.
Makes
it's
a
like
good person, authenticity.
Yeah, it does, right? And so I think artists have a reputation for sort of carrying that responsibility to a degree. So, they can speak truth to power in a way that other people can't, indirectly, directly. It would be really interesting to me if Russia wasn't as closed a society as it is right now. It'd be interesting to see what work is being made by artists right now, given the scenario. I'd be very curious to see. I mean, obviously you have a tightly controlled society, to put it nicely. So, but there's got to be stuff bubbling up. There has to be. And it'd be interesting to see, like, when there is a transition there, like what was being made, and did it have an impact on changing things? I think that I think of like that Give Peace a Chance by John Lennon. It's like, it's an amazing, simple thought, like super simple thought, not a complicated song by any stretch of imagination, but like completely timeless and completely, it's as impactful now as it was when it was written.
Yeah.
You know, in a different scenario, different time, different war. You know, unfortunately, I think this current scenario, it's kind of shocking in a way, because it seems, to me at least, it seems very old-fashioned.
Yeah.
The acquisition of territory, and it's like, we're okay. It just seems like a really old-fashioned way to do things, and savage. It just seems really savage to me. I can't process it even at all, really. But I think artists aren't always empowered to make the changes that, you know, that they could, you know, or that they see. But I think there's that element of truth telling that and speaking truth to power that's really important.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why art is important, you know.
Yeah. So moving forward, we'll kind of end on, like, if you were, like, how do you see things moving forward with art, or how would you advise people to?
Oh, yeah. It's exciting. Well, I think, like, back to the metaverse, it's a really exciting time for artists, because a whole new world is being built. Literally, a whole new world is being built. So you can build anything you can imagine. That to me is really interesting and appealing, because you can create a construct all your own, right? So that's pretty cool. I think the other thing people should know about the arts in general is that it's a massive, massive part of the global economic scenario, because if you think about all the applications of creativity, whether it's acting or music or whatever, think about all the revenue that drives. You know, creativity is a humongous industry, and it's multifaceted. You know, not everybody's a painter. Some people are set decorators, and some people are art directors, and some people are. There's so many different ways to manifest your creativity, and I think that's for parents, probably it's the hardest thing when your kid says, "I'm going to go to art school," and you're like, "Oh my God, not art school, right?" But the reality is, like, it's a great thing to choose. It's a great thing to choose if you're serious about it, like any college thing. But I think the beauty of it is, for me, at least from my point of view, was like, I learned to be a really good problem solver, and I started by doing it by hand, right, by drawing or painting or whatever. But that skill, that problem solving skill, is transferable to any problem. And like, once that dawned on me, that probably dawned on me after I was out of school a few years. I was like, oh, like, painting is actually really hard. You know, like, solving a business problem is actually kind of easy comparatively than like spending 30 years to learn how to draw, you know? Yeah. So it's kind of fascinating in that way. And I think that life, if you're lucky, life is pretty long. Like, I'm fully expecting to make it to 100. So it's like, you can have multiple manifestations of your creativity over a lifetime. You might be a filmmaker for a while, and then you might be something else. You might be a painter, or, you know, that's the greatest thing about it, you know? And I think if you're thinking about what you can contribute, that's also a nice thing. If you're contributing to the world in a meaningful way, in a positive way, that's what a great avocation to have, you know? Yeah.
And I mean, that's the whole platform for this, you know, this show, is to inspire people to really look at their lives and look at it like, look, you don't have to take it so seriously, you know, like, I'm doing this one linear, you know, job or thing, you know, for the rest of my life. Like no, reinvent yourself, like, be creative with your life, and like, look at different ways, like, not only to rethink things, but reinvent yourself, and reinvent, like, how you're looking at your investments, how you can turn a profit just from, you know, in a creative way, and inspire others to do the same.
Yeah. I think too, like, I think that if you do something that you're really passionate about, the money part of it is less important. I mean, obviously you have to make enough to survive. But the money part of it, I mean, even at this stage of my career, the middle of my career, it still tickles me that people buy my stuff. Like, I get tremendous pleasure out of that. And it's not because of the amount of money that's attached to it. It's just the validation of what you're making. It is worth something to somebody, whether it's $1 or $1 million. To me, that part doesn't matter. It's the validation that I really enjoy. And especially as an artist, as a visual artist, because it's not like you're a performing artist that goes up on a stage, you get the applause, you get the accolades and the reviews and all that stuff. Like being a visual artist is not like that. You know, you mostly work by yourself all the time, and then you have a show, and you've gone from being by yourself for months or years or whatever to a huge crowd of people trying to talk to you, which is always weird. And but that's it. And then that disappears, right? And then you're back. It's just you again in the studio, painting or drawing or whatever you're doing. And so that the validation is really important because it keeps you. It's the thing that gets you to the next.
The chase.
Yeah, and it just keeps you in the game because you're like,
Exactly.
God, somebody
You're in
patted
the
my head and
arena,
said it's okay.
And it might be a different game. It might be a
Yeah.
different, play, but you're still like in the arena and you're still playing.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think that creative minds really do think differently. They have a non-linear sometimes way of thinking. There's real value in that because they're going to solve a problem probably quite different than other people.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to what other people might see as a problem, they might see as an opportunity. Like there's a lot of things about the creative mind that are really fascinating, and drive a lot of value in all different types of marketplaces. It's why you would have somebody like, it's why brands would hire like a well-known musician to be a consultant. Like part of that is like they want to hit their demo and make their sales, but part of it is that person's going to think of things that they otherwise wouldn't think of.
Yeah.
And that's the real value. There's real value in that. Like I said, it drives innovation. Creativity drives innovation. So it's essential that you develop it, and it's like any other skill. I mean, you're born with I was born with a certain amount of talent, and the rest, I just like anything else, you just work on it. That's not the glamorous or sexy part of it, but it's putting in the time to learn it, like an athlete or anybody else. It's just exactly the same. That got to do your 10,000 hours.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
just do. And if you live long enough, that happens pretty fast.
With whatever venture or avenue that may be.
No matter what it is.
Yeah.
Whether you're selling real estate or whether it doesn't matter. You have to get those basic qualifications and the basic skills, and then build on those skills. And that never stops. And that's like that lifelong learning. It never stops. The curiosity.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine not being curious. Like I just can't imagine that. Like
I can't either.
Right? Like you walk past, you want to know.
But it does make people feel uncomfortable when you are curious and you're willing to make changes and you're willing.
Yeah.
People get really uncomfortable because it makes them scared because they're not willing to make those changes.
Yeah, agreed.
So I think it's a matter of, in today's age with all the changes going on, it's like giving people permission to kind of go into a different direction and do a new rebirth and a change and think in a new creative way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's like that's a good point. I think that there are the status quo is really powerful. Like you can't underestimate how powerful it is. And so if you're an agent of change, which is like, that's how I see myself. Like I'm not good with status quo. You couldn't put me in. I'm not the guy you put in to manage something. I'm the guy you put in to change things. And whether in my teaching career or in my business career or whatever, I lead with that all the time. I say like, don't engage with me if you don't like change. I'm the wrong guy because I'm going to change everything because I love the unknown, and I love when somebody sets a table and goes, we don't know anything about this. I'm like, great, let's find out all about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's that curiosity, but that's also that being confident that whatever the outcome is will in some way be better than where you are.
Yeah.
And you just have to have some
the willingness to be curious and expand. And have some faith in humanity and your own skills that you're going to get to a better place. Absolutely.
I think I don't know. To me, that's like the whole thing. But yeah, the unknown I love the unknown. That's what's so great and sexy about Web3.
Yeah.
It's the unknown. It's awesome. It's like the Final Frontier type stuff,
That's awesome.
So.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for doing this. I'm like so grateful.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, it was, and I love all that you're doing and creating now. And if you want to learn more, go to courtpotter.com and wait for our next podcast and show. Thanks so much. Thanks, Mark.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks.
I hope that in this discussion with Mark, you were able to understand how you can use art as an investment vehicle for your existing investments, or encourage you to explore virtual investments like NFTs. By connecting with your local arts community and diving into the online world of digital art, there's many easy steps that you can take to making art personal, professional, or financial, even social fulfillment vehicle and tool. If you have any questions for Mark, you can contact him on his Instagram account, which is Mark Smith Art, or on his website, Mark T. Smith, or his YouTube channel. Thanks so much for spending time with me today and hope you have a wonderful day.